Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we welcome on the show Kerry Jane, and she is a numerologist dedicated to consciousness and transformation. She seeks to unify the thought behind science and spirituality, and when she's not investigating the synchronicities of our mathematical universe, she's also working in the marine science field. So we're really excited to have her on board today. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. But Michael has a few announcements before we get started.
Hey, everybody, and thanks again for joining us. And thank you to all you guys who are subscribing. Our subscribers are ticking up, and it's really exciting for us to see that. So hopefully our show will get bigger and bigger, and we're getting a little closer to the magic numbers we need for YouTube to let us put advertising on the show. And we are not going to do that in a sense. We maybe put one on the beginning, but I sure hate it when I'm watching and you get ads all the way through a show, and we're definitely not going to do that to you guys. We want you to be entertained first and foremost. So our apologies in advance to YouTube, but we will see if we can do something, but nothing intrusive. And with that being said, thank you again to those of you who've gone on Ko-Fi and given us a little donation. It helps with our production costs, and so we do appreciate that too. And you can get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH. So go there, and it'll tell you about upcoming shows, and you can subscribe to our newsletter and leave a little donation if you enjoy the content and whatnot. So we appreciate everything. We have some great shows coming up in May, and I'm not going to necessarily go through them because we're still kind of finalizing a few of the little details. But the one I did want to talk about on May 16th is going to be our first 2-hour special. It's a Sunday, and it will be the paranormal group. So we'll have Holly Lindblom from Holly's Haunts and Craig Owens from Haunted by History. We're going to have Mystic Mitten on. We're going to have Amanda from Spooky Eats that was on last week. And we're just going to do a really fun discussion. It'll be at 1 hour with a little break and then a second hour to follow. So join us for that, and that'll be on the 16th of May. And then we've got all kinds of great shows planned. So as I said, the website will give you guys all the info on everything. So, and thank you to those of you who signed up for our tarot class starting in May. I think we're full or almost full. So if you are still interested, let me know. And if not, then maybe we can start planning a second one for over the summer. And I think that's it for me. So I'm excited about the show on numerology. I've always been fascinated by it. So I'm going to kick it back to you. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And welcome, Kerry.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. I think you are one of our youngest guests. We have a couple other younger ones, too. So it's exciting to have a different range of people of different ages and backgrounds.
I agree. Thank you.
So let's get started with how you became interested in numerology. What was your initial interest? How do you meet up with it? What's your story?
That's actually a pretty interesting story because when I first discovered numerology, I didn't like it. I was 14 years old at the time. I was visiting my cousin. I like to go over to her house in the summers. And we were in a bookstore, and my cousin Jen, so shout out to Jen, thank you, found this book on numerology. It was by Glynis McCants. It's like my numerology Bible, so to speak. I have it on my desk right here. And she brought this book to me, and she's like, you will really like this book. I know you're going to like this book. And I was looking through it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's okay, I guess, whatever. She's like, I'm going to buy it for you. And then we can go back to my house and we'll do our numbers and it'll be a good time. So I'm like, okay, Jen. All right. So I just went with it. And yeah, you would think this is the part of the story where it's like, oh, Kerry just suddenly falls in love with numerology. It wasn't like that for me. I did the first thing that most people do when they investigate, their astrology stuff or their numerology stuff or whatever. And I did my own numbers. I did my entire chart. And I just remember thinking, this is not me. I was like, this does not sound like me at all. This is the exact opposite of me because I have like repeating threes in my chart. And like one of the things it was talking about with that is like loves to dress up and loves to talk on the phone and just, was like an entertainer. And I to this day hate attention, hate photographs of myself. I'm like, I hate weddings. I like duck low. I stay out of the photos, like I'm that kind of person. And always was afraid of public speaking, still am. And I'm like, this just isn't me. Like, this is dumb. So like, put it away. But then I also did other people's numbers. I did people who were very close to me. I did like my siblings, my best friends, Jen, the person who's honestly probably behind all this again, shout out to Jen. And I just started to like see patterns. And I was like, it was just strange. I don't know how else to explain it. Like I just very easily started to see patterns in people and just very easily picked it up. I could then like translate almost anyone. Like I thought maybe there's something to this because I always had a very philosophical nature. Like I just came here like that. And I always need to understand why. So now I have this tool to maybe tell me why people are the way they are, how they are, or at least just give me a clue to something. So that's what drew me in at that point. Like I didn't really care about my own chart, which made no sense to me. I was just like, I wanted to understand why people did what they did and why they were the way they were. And after that, it was a few years of reading some books, but during that time, more than reading books, I would just do chart after chart after chart after chart after chart. And I'm very observant and very, I don't know, I have a very good attention to detail and I kind of get a good sense of who people are. And so I would just continuously do that. And then eventually, like after a year or so, I just experimented with doing like simple readings when I was at my sister's place and she had some friends over and we're all just having a few beers. I would do their numbers and freak them out. And at that point, like I had done so many charts that I wasn't just talking about what I had read from the book. I was like talking about a person that I intimately knew. Mm-hmm. And then I would say like, this is what this life path number does that I've noticed. And this is how they overcame that obstacle. And like, it was freaking people out. So I thought, okay, maybe there's something to this. And then from then on, I did readings in college. That's how I paid for like my textbooks. And much like astrology, you just never stop learning numerology. Like there's no end to it. Mm-hmm. You could spend an entire lifetime and still not get all of it, I feel.
So when you do a chart, like a basic chart for someone, what do you include, at least in the initial chart, in terms of what I know there's different numbers based on name and of course your birthday. So what do you actually do?
Yeah, so good question. What I like to do is predominantly the Pythagorean system, although people will do different things within that system as within other systems. And I take numbers from your name and your birthday to make a chart. And that is, for me, 6 numbers, 6 main numbers. 3 come from your name, 3 come from your birthday. And the ones that come from your birthday are critical. They are set in stone. You can't change your birthday. Mm-hmm. So that is what I pay the most attention to. But the name can have a lot of clues in it as well. Like what birth name did you have? Like what vibration did your soul want when it came in, if you believe in reincarnation? After that, when you got married to this person, which could have been a karmic relationship, like why? Like what was your switch in your destiny at that point, Or you can simply just change your name. I call myself Kerry Jane a lot for a couple of reasons, as you guys know, but one of them is because it reduces to 44. which has always been a number that has followed me around. It's kind of like my sign, I guess. It's hard to explain, but so you can like switch things around too. So like, just have people call you something else, and it is strange, but over time it does impact things in a weird way. And I think most people you talk to would agree, like, yeah, after I got married and I did change my name, it seemed like like there was a shift. Suddenly my focus went from finances to like learning how to express myself, something like that. And that's very common that I find when I do readings, when people have been married and had their name changed. So yeah, that's like the basis of that is looking at, what comes from your name, what comes from your birthday. That's 6 numbers. The most important number, and most numerologists will agree with this, is your life path number. And that's really easy to get. This is what's great about numerology. Everything that you get in numerology is simply addition. It's very simple. Anyone can do it. It's not hard. Mm-hmm. The way you get your life path number is you add all the digits in your birthday, and then you reduce it to one number. So say you did that, and that number came to 32. Then you would add 3 and 2, and that comes to 5. So I'm a 5 life path. So yeah, that is probably the most important number, in my opinion, in your chart. And
so I agree with you for your reasons. You can change your name, and not that the name is insignificant at all. In fact, sometimes I find in my life, like generally speaking, people with the name Michael have been a good influence on me. I mean, I'm married to Michael, but I also had teachers named Michael. It's a little bit crazy even that and I've had also negative names, just a single name, so I thought that name has a vibration because, we usually go by, our name, our first name, right? But I agree because I was thinking about that before the show, that you can't really change your birthday, and that's very significant. So do you, and just to add to your synchronicity around 44, according to one way I can add up my birthday, there's 2 different ways I can do it. One is a 44 that I have in my chart. And I don't kind of go by, I have a master number, but because I'm kind of mixed on, it is important, but I don't kind of get carried away with it. It seems actually a little harder. So from my experience, but I just thought that added to your synchronicity with the 44.
Yes, thanks.
So there you go. It's still coming after you.
It is.
And now, do you think after all these years, do you think, in your own life chart, do you feel like your life path is accurate since you had sort of initially a great experience with your own chart?
That's a great question because I'm still struggling with it a little bit, but still I am much farther than I was when I was 14. And I'm starting to see, like, I can see why this is. And a lot of people, it's like that. It's not until later in life where you look at it very closely and you think, yeah, you're right. Because I'm a 5 life path, and that's all about freedom. And every single decision that you make needs to be about making yourself liberated in some way. And that'll look like something completely different for everyone. But if you're not paying attention to that's when you get led astray. And it's so strange because I'm not like the typical 5 life path. Another reason, like I told you when I did my chart and I was like, no. And there's whenever you or anyone does their numbers or something in astrology, like there can be many reasons why that is. One of the many reasons that I think that happens, and this is what happened to me, is that if you're raised in a household with people with that same life path number, it's the same reason why twins are like often complete opposites. They're very connected in some creepy way. They're the same person, and yet they have completely different personalities. You ever notice that, like with twins? So that's kind of like the explanation for that. When you're growing up and, it doesn't matter what your natural instinct is, it's probably going to sway a little bit this way or a little bit that way, depending on what's in what that immediate environment is. So I grew up with two brothers with 5 life paths. I'm a 5 life path. So it's really interesting because we all take on different aspects of the 5 life path. There is like the gregarious 5 life path. That's kind of like the class clown. And one of my brothers literally was voted class clown in his yearbook in graduation. Like he's always been that. Another 5 life path is escapism, and like that is another brother I have who went on this journey of majoring in economics and then doing a complete 180 and deciding I'm going into environmental studies and moving to California, and nah, I don't want a boss, like stuff like that. So, and like, escapism is definitely a theme in his life, although I won't go into it. And then for me, I find I'm like the imaginative 5 life path. Like I was always so involved in books. I was always able to escape through books. I was always very investigative. That's another aspect of the 5 life path. So like you can split off into pieces, I think. Like, of course, there's not going to be enough room for like 2 class clowns, like in a house. It's just a family dynamic that we're all born into. And I think we tend to fall as a result of that environment somewhere on that spectrum. And it's hard to tell what that's going to look like for each person.
It's interesting too. And it's like, for me, numerology, because I kind of go in and out of it, not often, like I was the first thing I ever did was my own numerology chart. And then the book, I still have it's Your Days Are Numbered by Florence Campbell. So that was my first introduction. And, you're young, I was in my 20s, and you want to know all about yourself, and you do your numbers. And also I did have a psychic just told me, oh, you're an 8, and then just left me with that, like 8, and then said a few things. And I was like, what does that mean? What is an 8? And so I went off but I noticed for me, you can find new things about numbers on your own. It's sort of like astrology in that, all of a sudden you might be introduced to another layer or concept that may not be appropriate for everyone, but for you it resonates. So for instance, there was a time where I was reading something where it was more of an esoteric view of the number 8. And they were saying 8 is the first free number after the creation of the world, 7 days to create it. And at the time, it did resonate with me, the idea of having this sort of freedom, and there was a little bit more to it. And it wasn't a typical numerology book. And I just felt it was a message at the time to add to what I knew about the 8. And it wasn't negating what I knew, but I just think it's interesting, even numbers, you can come across like a different view from maybe a different culture that maybe at the time you're kind of ready to see, or it speaks to your psyche. So they're not necessarily, numbers aren't all set in stone exactly. That's my experience.
Yes, I completely agree. And there's just, you can look at the numbers on many different levels. Like most of what I've done on my channel, Metanoia, has been just kind of like the, I don't know, shallow end of it, like, personality traits and stuff. But like, much like in astrology, you can go deeper and look at the evolutionary aspect to that. And for me, unfortunately, personally, I just haven't had enough time in my life to dedicate a very, very deep meditation into the evolutionary esoteric aspect of the numbers. If I just had enough time to do anything after I'm done writing my book, I think I would dedicate years to this. I think I would study sacred geometry, because that has a lot to do with numerology, and sound, like sound frequency, sound everything, and a deep meditation too, because I feel like a lot of it has been lost. Numerology is ancient. It's in, Hebrew culture. It's in many different cultures. You can find it. I mean, it wasn't mostly what we use now, because simply it's most understandable to us, is the Pythagorean systems, at least in the Western world. Simply because that's just easy for us. But it's very obscure. Numerology is not like astrology, where you can trace very specific things to specific regions and times. With numerology, you can do that, but only to a certain extent. It's just very mysterious. It's hard to pinpoint how we developed this, and I just feel like it's one of the things that we've lost, one of the ancient teachings, knowledge, what have you, that we lost. And as an investigator, I find that really exciting because now I can do my own journey into it. Will it be the same numerology as everyone else's? I don't know, but I think that it will help people. I really think that's one of the good things about having so many different translations. It's the same thing that like a lot of psychics will tell you. It's like, I understand that my practice isn't for everyone. You know, I trust that the people who will benefit from my practice will find me. And that's what I think about every time I make a video. I'm like, I know this is not going to apply to every single person, but I know this will help someone. So I'm going to make it. And I think that's a good way to approach a lot of this stuff that has been lost. And then maybe somewhere we can meet in the middle one day.
Well, I think that it's very important that you actually do charts, and you've done a lot of charts. For someone young, you started really young, and there's no replacing that, you know, because that's how you find out if something works. So that's how we found the tarot worked or did not work, because we did so many readings that after a while you'd say, well, this just isn't working. Maybe it did mean that at some point, but it doesn't really work. And I think that is part of, if metaphysics is testing things out through experience and not only through like a scientific, you know, observation, that they're both important. So study's important, but I've met people that maybe know way more about a topic, whether it's astrology or tarot historically, but they haven't done a lot of readings. So theoretically, some of what they think may not hold up.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot that I could talk about with that. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Like, doing the work is the only way to learn any of this stuff for sure. It is a tool. We need to not forget that these are tools. Okay. The numbers don't govern us. The stars don't govern us. They are tools to understanding, and they're synchronicities in a lot of ways. So at least when you go to study like repeating numbers and stuff like that. And I like when people tell me I'm wrong, because that's exactly how I learn. And with good reasons why. Like, you know, I see most comments I get in shock are like, wow, this is so me. But occasionally I get a comment on like my video or wherever that is just, it's not just like, oh, this isn't accurate to me. Here's why, here how it is and how it isn't. It's more like very sad. Like, for example, say like on my One Life Path video, where I talk about how they are very open-ended people because simply they're here to be successful at whatever it is they want to do. And a lot of the times this means you're very ambitious in something very particular. You have many different interests that you like to explore. You naturally want to be the leader. And then I get like a comment that is very sad, like very just kind of like wounded. You can tell like this person has maybe struggled with this specifically. And to me, I sometimes think like, is this the inaccurate representation of the life path number, or is this person here to work through that? Because through the evolutionary aspect of that, that is what this is. And that's why I personally don't use challenge numbers, because I think the challenge number is our life path number. I believe in reincarnation, and I believe you choose your birthday, you know, like with astrology, you choose your life path number. Okay, maybe that's something you've been doing for a while, but maybe not. Maybe this is your first go at trying to be a leader, you know? that can be very traumatic, especially if you're born in an environment that doesn't allow you to do that at all, you know, just as an example. There's so many layers to it. And that's why at the end of my videos, I always say, like, I don't know you. I don't know your life. I don't know what your circumstance is. The numerology, everything can't tell us what your life circumstance is. Mm-hmm. It kind of just gives us a clue as to, like, what did I major in the University of Life, and then what did I minor in, you know? That's kind of like what it does, but people don't really use it like that. Like, they use most things, most metaphysical things. You know, I was telling you guys this before when we first met, that I really feel like I'm so happy that everything in this realm has become so trendy, because at least we can talk about it more often now. Mm-hmm. We can kind of be a little bit more open, be ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's nice for it to not be so taboo, but then it's not so great, because as soon as something becomes trendy, it often becomes commodified, or it often becomes distorted or watered down, because everyone's egos are touching it. Mm-hmm. And then we don't know what we're looking at anymore. That's when a lot of this stuff gets lost. We forget that this is a tool of understanding. You still have to pick up the wrench and work yourself through it. This is work. That's what a lot of people don't get. You know, that's why you see so many people who are like, what crystal can I buy to cure my depression? Like, it's not used like that, you know, like, right. What thing can I buy to fix my life? And that's not what any of this is for. Like, you know, you're given like some wood and some tools. Like, it's not going to just all come together, you know? Mm-hmm. So I don't know how I got down there, but
no, I going back to that concept of that your life path number is the challenge. I totally agree for two reasons. One, I was listening to Steve Forrest, who's a very brilliant astrologer and just a wise person. And he was saying that your sun sign is something you're becoming. I'd never heard anybody say that you are learning to be Capricorny, or you're not just born. And when you said that about the life path, I think that's very similar, that maybe you're right. Maybe some people had a little higher evolution in the path because they've done it before. But if you haven't, it's even harder. You're not supposed to know how it works. And it can be a very frustrating. And I personally feel like it has been for me, you know, my life path number. I'm not completely in harmony with it. Every now and then I look at another number and say, well, maybe I'm really like that, my vowels or my consonants. And I think you're onto something there, because, and it's not that, you know, it's not that we're resisting things, but it's hard to grow. I find it's hard, even after I'm over 60 now. It's not easy even now. And but it's very worthwhile. And I can't imagine my life without metaphysics and the things that it forces me to look at, even if I don't have a aha moment with it, you know, which I once in a while I have with certain tools, but certainly I haven't with certain other ones. I'm still working on it. So I agree that the challenge is the life path number.
Yeah, that's how I see it. I know a lot of numerologists will disagree with me, and that's completely okay, because I don't know what they've seen in their practice, and I can't tell them what's up. You know, like I just simply got to this point of doing so many charts and looking at things so closely. And so that's where I am right now with it. And yeah, it's just, oh, I forgot what I was going to say, but I think that numerology is you know, like people discover it the same exact way we did. You know, they were really curious to know about another thing that will tell them about themselves. You know, we are here for all of us, self-discovery. Nothing wrong with that at all. But I don't think that's where most of the benefit comes from. You know, there's, in my opinion, the cycles, our life cycles, those have numbers. You know, there's a year that we're in, that's a number the world is going through. And then compared to your birthday, that sets you on a personal year cycle, you know, and then you have monthly cycles within that year cycle. So like there's these layers of chapters of your life, and we're all going through these 9 years on our own trajectories. And what I've personally found numerology has helped me the most is working through that. It's so hard to just go through life blind completely. And we're supposed to do that to an extent. Like, that is the test. We're not really supposed to know why everything. We're supposed to be kind of blind through this earth experience. But I don't know, there's something about knowing what personal year I'm in, what personal month I'm in, that helps me get through it. Like, for example, I'm in my 5-year 9-month, and I often say that 9 is the month of completion. But with this, depending on what's on the horizon, it's emotional because all the shadows from the past kind of like surface. I call them phantoms of the interim, because you're like in between something, and like stuff just comes up that you haven't thought about in a while, and you're like, why am I thinking about this right now? And you get very emotional, and it's upsetting. Or like just weird stuff, like happens during the day, and it's just like, this has been happening to me, and at least I know why. Like, okay, I know I'm supposed to go through this right now. This is a weird spooky month, and I feel like I'm in limbo, but I don't have to be upset about that, because I'm sure there's a function to this. So I think that's the underutilized tool to numerology, is not just like knowing your chart, because honestly, people watching this video probably have investigated it enough, unless it's completely new to them, where they have a good grasp of who they are through the lens of numerology. That happens really fast. You can do that in an hour. Where it really comes into utility, in my opinion, is looking at your life through these 9-year chapters, and then comparing the past and utilizing to that with saying, like, here's where I am. How can I best utilize this time so that I'm in the best place I can be in the future? To me, that's where it has had the most expansiveness at this time in my life. And I wish more people knew that.
So have you kept any kind of records of it at any point to sort of compare, or do you just do it more organically? Or would you recommend maybe initially people that are getting to use cycles on a monthly and yearly basis to maybe make a little bit of notes so they learn what it really means to them?
I think keeping a journal is a great idea. Sorry, excuse me. But also, you don't have to, because I don't know, for me, when I started paying attention very closely to the cycles, I was going through a lot of major stuff in my life, still am. There was, this year I graduated from college. This year I wanted a new start. This year my dad died of brain cancer, and my whole life was, flipped upside down. And I remember, I can look at the years and remember what I was going through as I was going through it, and say, yeah, that was a really emotional 2 year. I hated it, or something like that. And now that I'm past that, I can see what I had to do that year. And so here's some added wisdom to the 2 year that I can put towards that. So you can use a journal, like if you're maybe in a lull in your 9-year chapter. But for me, it's been really easy to pinpoint certain years, simply because I remember very vividly what I was doing in my 7-year, or I remember very vividly what I was doing in whatever month, just because I was using numerology at the time to work through it, if that makes any sense. So
you must have a good memory too, though. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, I don't think if I was like going through a lot during those times that I would remember, but because, I'm like, if you're in your formative years, it's easier to remember what was going on that year, and because that shapes who you are, really, and like where you are right now, circumstance wise. So yeah, it's up to you, but that's a great idea. Keeping a journal would be a great way to monitor that.
Now, on your YouTube channel, and it's called Metanoia, is that correct?
Metanoia.
Metanoia. and I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but you do have a lot of different videos on the numbers and how to do certain things. So we'll certainly do a shout out at the end, but I just wanted to jump in and talk a little bit about sort of your metaphysical interest in general. And even that word, I personally had never heard of that word. And so can you tell us why you chose that word for your YouTube channel and I think some of your other Instagram and things like that?
It chose me. I don't, it's kind of strange. Yeah, it metanoia found me for sure. It's not something that I like dug up and out and was like, here you go. Some people believe that there's like ideas always in the atmosphere, and it's just like waiting for a consciousness that fits well with that, like a shirt that fits, and you just put it on and you walk around with it. To me, that's what metanoia is. It really found me. And to be more specific, metanoia began way before the YouTube channel, the social media accounts, the blog. I used to write a blog before I had this. It started with an idea for a book, and I was 19. So I was going through a bad time, and was very much kind of like floating through some very interesting subconscious place that is hard to describe with words. And I just this book idea came to me where it was just souls living their lives throughout reincarnation on different planets and different civilizations in this story of transformation. And it's the same time, it was the same time that Cloud Atlas had come out. And like it's very strange. It's hard to explain, but basically I think it came to me in a few chunks, and once it was there, it was there. And I started writing it, and eventually I was like, what the heck am I going to name this book? And I'm using like numerology to help me write this. And I was on Pinterest and I was just like, okay, universe, what should I name this book? And I clicked refresh and the words metanoia came up. And then I looked into it and I was like, it means a spiritual transformation or conversion. And in a religious aspect, it can also mean to repent, which I'm not a fan of. I don't believe that has utility now. And I like that too, because now I have this within the definition, this transformation of a spiritual journey, a quest away from things like guilt, and really just going through this honest process, whatever that looks like, which can be anything. It's a deep transformation. That's what all this feels like to me, whether it be my book or the life that I'm living or this universe or planet Earth story, numerology, whatever. It feels like metanoia to me. So yeah, I was writing this book. I decided to call it Metanoia, and I realized no publisher would ever touch this book. So I was like, I gotta make social media accounts, and I should make a YouTube channel because no one reads anymore, unfortunately. Like no one was visiting my blog. So I decided to learn how to get over my fear of public speaking and just like started making videos on YouTube, and it's all named Metanoia.
I think that's a wonderful story. And I love that you said you're using numerology to help you with writing the book. And again, it's a tool, and it sounds like to me you've really taken up the tool to use it in many ways in your life in a very, almost practical way too. And I think that that does separate people on some level in terms of even understanding how it then works. So I applaud you for taking the time to do that, because that means that you have confidence in your tool.
Yes. And I have, in my opinion, confidence because it's not something that serves me. Nothing in arguably in this conversation, numerology is what we're talking about. But my true gateway to all of this was growing up on the seashore and spending an enormous amount of time in nature alone. That was like my access point to any wisdom that I could give anything to anyone at all about anything. And I learned through that process, like the nature, like this doesn't exist for me. This exists with me. It gives me tools to do the best that I can. And the best way for me to utilize this is to dissolve into it, to understand it and work with it, to coexist. You know, that's the whole nature, I think, in my opinion, movement, is this idea of coexisting instead of conquering. So yeah, numerology is not a way for me to chase my desires. It's a way for me to understand and to serve. Like I feel like I identify with the term volunteer soul. Feel like I don't care what happens to me anymore. Like it sounds crazy, but like I just don't care. Like I just want to make a difference here, because I mean, I shouldn't have to explain, things are not going great here on Earth right now. So I think that's why or how metanoia could find me, because I was open to that. You know, it's not something that I'm forcing down a channel. It's something that I'm just allowing to be in my life.
So I assume then that you would be a big fan of the whole Fibonacci sequence and seeing it in nature and the flowers. And I mean, I take photos a lot of flowers particularly, and some of it's because it's just I walk around my neighborhood, and the symmetry in them, it never ever ceases to amaze me, especially like sunflowers. And I've gotten pictures of sunflowers. The seeds they're like these mandalas, you know, and it's always so it makes me believe and know that the universe really is quite magical and mystical in spite of the harm we've done to it, and it's still, you know, going on strong. I think that there's certainly hope for nature, maybe not for humans, but so but you must really appreciate that because of the numerology and the fact that you love nature so much that you see the two probably in ways that other people might not see.
Yeah, that definitely does satisfy the left brain part of me, which is very much there. I do operate on mostly logic, which is strange for like a lot of people in these communities. They tend to operate like more right brain, like artistic, emotional, whereas I was always very analytical and observant and careful in that way. So yeah, like that Fibonacci sequence and all that, the geometry always excites me. I like to call this universe like symmetrical entropy sometimes, because people like to argue that it's all random. Look at it. Nothing is happening with patterns. And I'm like, have you tried zooming out of that limited view? Have you tried to just, instead of look at this one thing, like pan out? You would see like what seems random has a symmetry to it. And there's this very deep Gandalf part of me that understands that on a metaphysical level, like that I just simply can't explain with my human words. And that's why one day I would really like to do a deep meditation where I become a recluse for a few years somewhere, you know. I feel like that's the only way I could touch that. I think it would be a time of remembering rather than learning. Going into as above, so below, pretty much is what you're talking about with that, in my opinion. You know, when you're able to look at a flower, somehow you understand the cosmos and your place in it, you know, like that's what it is. In my opinion, that's what I see.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the idea of being analytical and also wanting the experiential. And in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Kagyu tradition, and this is what I learned because that's the tradition I follow. There's like 4 main schools, and they're all similar, but they all emphasize learning. I know the Kagyu is also emphasizing a little bit more maybe than others, maybe not the Nyingma, they're the devotional experiential side. And sometimes it gets a little contradictory because sometimes you'll see, oh, this person didn't have any scholarly energy and they became enlightened simply because of doing a mantra every day for years and years, or simply by offering. So there are sort of these outliers in the theoretical, but I love it always has appealed to me, the idea of both in the same path, the analytical, the logical, the study, and like you just said, going in and I'm just going to take some time to have that meditative experience so that you embody what you have learned.
Yes, I agree. I feel like I'm not really certain why I'm here or what I'm supposed to be doing here, but sometimes I feel like it is, if anything, to unite this left and right brain aspect of our society at this time, because we are in a complete state of division right now between everything. And one of the things are science and spirituality. Those are completely exclusive things to one another. They exist separately in our society right now. And yeah, it's starting to get a little bit better simply because we went so far in science that we're dipping back into the spiritual. You know, quantum physics came about and was starting to say stuff that we've always been saying, you know, the Native Americans, the, indigenous cultures of everything around the world. And for me, in my life, I've just always had to be two completely different people. I've had to be only a scientist, only a materialist. That's what that means in this society. When I go to work studying the natural world, and then when I'm in like a tarot group or any card reading group or a crystal group, I have to be just only feeling things, and that's it. And I don't agree with either. Mm-hmm. I don't like either. Like that is, both are dogmatic. You need both together. You need to do both together. You need to blend them. And to me, that always came very naturally because it wasn't just extreme observation and critical thinking that I was naturally good at. It was always feeling my way through things. You know, my moon's in Cancer, despite the fact that most of my signs are in Aquarius. So, that's how I relate to that, is just very being like Spock and operating from logic. But I get feelings about things all the time that logic would never explain. And it would be illogical to think that logic is the only thing that needs to, be here. It's just we need both. In my opinion, yeah, both is the key. And I find it very hard to find people where both communities can come together in one thing. It's very rare that I find a person that is willing to have the kind of conversation I'm having right now, where the scientific method is as equally as important as the law of attraction or something like that. The two we cannot seem to combine the two at all right now. And I hope that it's not like that forever.
Well, you'll find more people, and there have been people around, especially Theosophy is based on that idea. If you go and look at the origins of Theosophy with Madame Blavatsky in the late 1800s, they wanted to investigate and find out if something was truthful from all points of view, and they're open to different kinds of religions. Now, I don't know how strong Theosophy is, but that is the basis, and I think they have a motto, something, the only religion is truth, or something like that, so that they're seeking truth using these different modalities, but they're not mainstream. Even the people that, that we have on our show are not known mainstream, even though they've been, Dan Moore, who talked about alchemy and Kabbalah, he's been studying for 25 years, and he has within his own group, but he's not known like, the people that wrote The Secret. So you're always going to kind of deal with that a little, but you'll find that there are people that embrace both sides in numerology, in maybe divination's a little tricky, but in terms of the other parts of metaphysics, because, divination is super popular right now. So that's one of the issues in a sense, but you'll find other people that will have those conversations with you for sure that believe in both. And certainly some of us might operate more on one side than the other, but I think it has been around. It's just not that's kind of you're hitting into the real deal, I think, when you meet people like that.
I agree. Yeah, you're right. It's a statistical impossibility for there not to be like many people out there who are like this. I think it's just because I've always had, one foot in one community and one fit in another, that it's really hard to find a mixture in both. Like when you're doing something for, your employment, it becomes a different story. Like you're not just gonna be able to find open-minded people like that. And it's the online communities are ooh, so
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason why. But yeah, sure, like you go out there into communities, I'm sure you're going to find people who embrace both in their own way, for sure.
And I don't mean there's maybe tons of people, but there are people out there that totally agree with you in terms of how you should approach your development of consciousness, so you'll find, and yeah, sometimes it just takes a little time to meet the right people that you kind of click with. I did want to mention something kind of funny that coming into the show, I have this thing where sometimes I find pennies and funny places, and they represent different things for me, but I found this huge pile of pennies and I added them up, and the number was 215, which is an 8, which is my life path number. And I thought that was just really cute. And the penny thing had another meaning just because it's been an ongoing thing, but I hadn't found a pile like that probably for 6 or 7 years. I usually find like 2 or 3 or 8 or, and it's kind of a game I have with the universe. So I wanted to share that with you. I think the show brought that on a little bit.
That's really interesting too, because age is often matters of the physical world, which can often translate to like finances or like coins, like you could, I guess, think of the monetary aspect of that as well. So that's just what came to mind when you said that. It's funny.
Yeah. Now, speaking of signs in the world, how do you feel about this? It's a very popular thing, the whole angel number, and people seeing an angel number. And do you think, I sometimes look at the interpretation, I just don't know where they get the interpretation for it. Is there a basis for the interpretation, like a sort of book, or is it random?
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm very confused as to why they are angel numbers and not just regular numbers. Yeah, I believe in angels and things like that. And I'm sure they are trying to communicate with us sometimes. And yeah, they probably use numbers. But to me, there's no like angel numbers and then regular numbers. There's just numbers. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, maybe your angels are trying to like communicate with you with numbers because they know you're paying attention to that or something, So honestly, I'm still trying to like wrap my head around that still, but that's like, as of right now, my opinion of that is just like, it sounds nice. It's like, it sounds nice. So I think people just call it that, it's just like, maybe it's just numerology, but your team trying to communicate to you through numerology. And I believe in that as well. And I honestly never identified with the realm of angels and stuff like that, but at the same time I've always found myself mixed up with that in weird ways. Like there's this one woman I follow who's called Angel Souls, and she's great. She does like weeklies and dailies of like, she uses cards, but she says she just does that for the visual aspect of it. A lot of it is just channeling, and I really like her readings. She's very down to earth. She's very straightforward. I always recommend her channel to anyone. But yeah, like her whole basis is angels, is like the realm of angels. And I was just watching this video the other day where she was talking about like how to tell if you are of the angelic realm or something like that, like I guess what they would call an earth angel. And it was very different from like everything that I had read, because you'll go on Facebook, you read those articles and stuff, or you Google stuff and you read those articles, and they're in my opinion usually pretty watered down and not very helpful. But she explained things in such a way that like I've never identified with anything more. Like, this is it, you might be an earth angel if this is how your experience has been, since a child. And she was going to like very strange specific things that I had never like talked about. And I'm like, this is interesting. So it just makes you think, like, we like to think that this is all separate stuff, but really they're all meshed in with one another. Like, yeah, maybe I am an earth angel. I'm not going to go make a video talking about angels because I haven't studied any of that and I don't have any authority over that. But like, I don't think, honestly, if I was an angel, I wouldn't care what you call stuff.
Right.
I would just want you to be there for the reason you're there as best you can. And that's it.
It is true. Yeah. It's important to find out what people mean by what they say. When like one person will say, this is what I mean by angels, this is what I mean by it. Or so it is good not to make any assumptions, to be open-minded like that. So I was just kind of curious though, because I agree with you, but I just never really looked deeply into it, except I'd see, this is, and they'd be these long 3 numbers, and they sometimes are strange numbers. They're not all like 111. They'll be like, some number you wouldn't think of as being particularly important.
And I go into that too. Just, I'm not calling it angel numbers. I'm just like talking about numerology. And yeah, like, I think, I don't know, this goes just into the realm of like, the trends. What is selling, what, and then that's what basically determines what we call things. And it does take some time to like sift through that and be like, what does this actually mean? Unfortunately now, because of that. And I think this is one of those cases, and it is very strange to me how people with such confidence talk about certain things. Like, I don't know, it's just, I've had so many experiences where, like, if you were to ask that question, for example, like, what does it mean with this? And then a person says, this is exactly what it is. I'll tell you, like, I'm skeptical. I'm like, are you God? Like, are you in charge of everything? Like, what are you how where is this coming from? Like, and to me, that's how I became such a good numerologist, is by being skeptical and being unsure and having humility and not thinking everything is like, I don't get stuck in magical thinking. Like, I am still a human being experiencing everything that is, which is a low density experience. And if I didn't want to do this, I wouldn't be here right now. I'm not going to try to be this angelic non-human thing because I'm in a human body, So
well, and it can be a way to escape. And my father said it to me privately. He says, we're here to have a human experience. And he's very metaphysical, and he's had all kinds of kind of crazy Aquarian experiences in his life, but that's why we're here. And before we're getting closer to the end, and I just wanted to shout out where people can contact you. So where are the best places to reach you? Is there one or a couple?
Probably the best way would be on my YouTube channel, Metanoia, because in the description of all my videos, that's where you can find everything. If you want to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, etc., that's also where I have the links to like my services, to a numerology reading, or like I went into a lot in this video, my favorite is the monthly readings. I do monthly readings on Patreon, where, like we talk about where you are in your cycle and where you were, where you're going. And I find that to just be like a nice casual little check-in. I basically just sit down with all your guys' numbers and look at, okay, this is where they are now, and kind of leave that door open. And that's very helpful. I didn't do it for a very long time, but I was doing it for myself, and I was like, other people would probably benefit from this. So that's probably where they could find me the best, is my YouTube channel, Metanoia.
And for those listening, it's METAN as in Nicholas OIA. That's for people that are listening on the podcast, and I'll put the link in our YouTube channel as well, so that both of you, both the forms can get to it easily. So we're coming to the end of our show, but I want to thank you so much for coming on. It was really fascinating. I really learned some new things from you about numerology, and it was truly insightful.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Good. Well, we'll have you back in the future.
Oh,
and,
thank you.
and have a great week. And thank you all for listening. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together.